Hey, Rebel Rouser. I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. We're at episode number 1576, and today, well, it turns out that there was one other one-shot story that I hadn't yet talked with you about, and so we'll cover that today, and then tomorrow we'll have the interview with Patrick Johnson, Georgetown professor of physics, about outer space in Star Wars. But today, we're going to talk about what Beckett and crew were doing before they ended up in the job that they were running for Solo, a Star Wars story. And so here is the deal. Apparently, well, first of all, I guess spoiler territory, right? Spoiler alert. Okay, do we really? But yeah, why not? Anyway, so this is another story where it's not that deep in the sense that doing a top 7 takeaways or 7 top takeaways, yeah, I don't think we necessarily need to do that. I mean, I could manufacture it for you, if you will, but the story itself is pretty simple, and the gist of it is this. Beckett and crew are on a planet called Hoorun 4, and they are supposed to find some guy who has a horde of blank ID chips. Now, the reason why they're after these blank ID chips is because apparently with the Empire tightening down trade routes, these blank ID chips have become priceless. I guess these are ID chips that you can program to represent whoever you want them to represent, and they would be totally legitimate and be able to pass off for actual, real, authentic ones. And so this guy apparently has a bunch, and so under the orders of Dryden Voss, or so they think, wink, they are going to try and steal them from this guy. And so there's a funny little scene where the guy who has them is in a bar, and Rio's in there playing cards, and Woody Harrelson shows up under some robes, and everybody goes, "Oh, Death Priest, ah!" Which I guess is supposed to be, some sort of superstition that is kicking around the galaxy and in a lot of different places, because it's a scam that they run every so often, much to Val's dismay. And we also get to see a Valacord, incidentally, in this thing. It basically looks like a large keyboard turned on its end and stood up and then given a little bit of flair, almost like a harp, basically, with the structure surrounding it to keep it in place. But anyway, so the Death Priest chokes Rio, or pretends to choke Rio. Rio pretends to be choked and die, and everybody freaks out and runs out of the bar, but not before Val puts a tracking device on this character that has the blank ID chips. Long story short, they track him to a ship, and there's a giant sea monster that gets involved because the guy has been hiding his main ship under the water on Hoorun 4. And there's a neat little scene where they have to steal another boat, basically, to go follow the guy, and Rio's like, "Yeah, we got a bar on this tub, let's go," and he starts mixing a drink while he covers Beckett going for the loot on the ship. And he's like, "You're making a drink right now?" And Rio's like, "I've got 4 arms, but I've only got 2 guns." So yeah, he's mixing drinks while he's shooting at the guys that are trying to keep them from getting these blank ID chips. Well, turns out they get the blank ID chips, and they go to make contact with Dryden, or Dryden's people, to turn the blank ID chips over. But turns out, surprise, surprise, Enfys Nest is involved in this and masked the communications somehow to make it seem like this was a job that was being run by Dryden Voss, when in fact Enfys Nest and her crew were actually after the thing. And so they get the drop on Beckett and crew, but not exactly, because of course Woody Harrelson has one last trick up his sleeve. He's got a self-destruct button for the ship that they stole anyway, so it doesn't matter so much. And the whole thing goes kablooey. And so they managed to get away, even though stormtroopers are arriving on the scene. No idea what happened with Enfys Nest, although, you have to assume, obviously, that she and her crew got away, because we see them in Solo, a Star Wars story, but it seems without blank ID chips. So all of that risk-taking was for naught. And Val dryly observes, "Do you think we're going to get in trouble with Dryden for losing the blank ID chips on a job that he didn't even ask us to do in the first place?" And they're like, "Yeah, I don't know about that." So now they are without a ship and going to have to steal one to get back to Dryden and company and figure out what their next con is going to be, which it sounds like it's going to be based on the story thing. The panel at the end of this one shot, it sounds like, check out the next adventure of Beckett and crew in the Solo: A Star Wars Story adaptation. So it's a sales pitch basically for the adaptation of Solo: A Star Wars Story in Marvel Comics format. So it certainly does make it sound like the next job that they pull after this one is the job trying to steal the coaxium, which then, of course, goes horribly awry, and we all know how that goes. So, yeah. There you go. Pretty simple and straightforward, right? That's Beckett number 1, and apparently the only one because it's just a one-shot situation. Unless they decide to do a second one at some point and go further back into his past. But, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen anyway. That is going to do it for this episode here, and I hope you'll subscribe to the show to make sure you get episodes delivered to you so you don't even have to think about it. They'll just show up for you. And also, hope you will support this ongoing enterprise by becoming a patron at patreon.com/SW7X7. For now, though, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2018, Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it!